Huntington welcomes you to the Director's Talk for the Bluest Eye, featuring Director Awoye Timpo in conversation with Assistant Director Jasmine Brooks. All events at the Huntington include a land acknowledgement. The Huntington acknowledges that our physical spaces stand on the occupied homeland of the Massachusetts people. We begin by acknowledging the Massachusetts tribe, from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We pay respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit the land to this day. We honor and respect the many Native peoples who are connected to this land, past, present, and future, including the Nipmuc and Wampanoag peoples. And now, the Director's Talk.
Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Brooks. I'm the Assistant Director in the Bluest Eye, and I'm here with Awoye.
Hey, Jasmine. How's it going?
Good. So I'm really excited to talk about kind of the rehearsal process with the Bluest Eye, some of the themes of the play, and just kind of like chat with you today, about everything. So I just first want to acknowledge that this play is happening. Finally, it's been 2 years in the making. This production was supposed to happen in the spring of 2020, and so many things have changed. The world has changed. And I just wanted to kind of talk about how the vision of the play has grown since then. Like, what have you learned in the past 2 years from stepping away from this project and coming back, and just everything that's happened?
Yeah, it's so insane because, we actually started planning for this production, I would say 3 years ago. It was probably in 2019 that we started to put the pieces together and have conversations with designers. And I just remember so vividly in February of 2020, as all of us, who had projects coming, we're all in conversation with the theaters. And, I would just get calls every now and again. Okay, right now it looks like we're on, but we're just going to play it by ear. Things are starting to shut down. And so most of February was kind of like this sense of, okay, something's happening in the world right now, and we might not be able to gather to make this production. And so we were supposed to start rehearsal for this, I think a week after everything shut down.
Yeah.
And so over the course of the past couple of years, we've been in conversation with the theater, and we knew that the theater was really committed to making sure that the production happened. There's so many shows that, unfortunately got canceled completely, if not postponed. So we were really lucky, that we were able to even have the opportunity to revisit this, because as we know, so many of our colleagues did not have that opportunity with so many wonderful shows that they were working on. So it really felt like a great kind of privilege and honor to even be engaging in a conversation about, okay, let's do this. Like, this piece feels valuable and useful and relevant, even all these years later. And so it's been a really beautiful process to kind of revisit it. And I'll say too, when we were originally planning for this production, we were going to be an entirely different theater space.
That's right.
And so it's been kind of revisiting it on a lot of levels. It's been on a spiritual level of what does it mean for us to be making this play right now? It's been on a physical level of we knew really early on that we didn't want to kind of take our old design and our old concept and move it into a new space. And it felt really important, even now, we're really asking questions about what does it mean for people to gather, and so when we started planning for the production, probably last summer, those were kinds of questions that we were asking ourselves, but really thinking about, what does it mean for us to gather right now and tell stories? And that's really been our kind of guiding force throughout the whole reimagining process.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you were speaking about gathering, because I felt like that energy was so prevalent in the whole rehearsal process. And especially like a lot of people, this was their first show back in a pandemic. And I felt like community was really important in our rehearsal process. And I would just love to talk about how you use community in directing this play and storytelling, and kind of what we're the influences in that choice?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So, I think that it's kind of on so many kind of meta levels, right? Because there's one level that's just about us as artists coming together to make something, and so, it was thinking about what does it mean for us as a community of artists to come together and tell a story. And then there's the kind of larger community. So then we are members of the community, but we're also telling the story to the larger community. And what do we want that kind of experience to feel like? One thing I've definitely learned over the years is, having the right group of people in the room is everything. There's that
Yes.
saying about casting, that like casting is 90% of your job is about casting and just putting the right group of people in the room. And I learned many years ago how important it is to have just the exact right energy of people in the room. And, I always say you could be the best actor in the entire world. If you are a pain in the ass, if you are a person that you don't want to be in the room with, like, it's not worth it to have negative energies in the space when you're trying to create. So I feel like one of the beautiful things about this process is just that we have such an amazing group of people. Like, they're so talented, but they're just like good people, and so that's been amazing. It's just made the process so joyful. And then to the larger question of the community, I often just like to, I don't know, just kind of look back and see, like, where are we coming from? Why are we doing this? Kind of what are the origins of performance, especially Black performance? What has it meant throughout our own lifetimes, throughout the lifetimes of our ancestors, to have gathered and told stories to one another? What's the responsibility of the artist inside of the larger community? What has been the value in the community for storytellers to help us understand the world that we live in, to help us ask big questions, to help us know that we're not the first ones here. This is our story as part of a larger continuum that just goes round and round and round. And so it felt really exciting and important to kind of infuse all of those elements into what we were creating.
Yes, I love that. I love you pulling on like all the lineage. And what's really great is that we have such an amazing team. Shout out to Kurt Douglas, our choreographer, and David Coleman, our music director. And I feel like those elements in the play have also kind of aided that storytelling aspect, have pulled on like traditions of African storytelling, Black storytelling. So what was it like kind of pulling all of that together too when creating this world?
It's funny. It's I feel like so many parts of the process they feel almost kind of like segmented, but it's like everything is so important to making the whole piece that you're creating. And so very, very early on, probably the first person I really started speaking with was Jason, Artisan West, our amazing, amazing scenic designer. Yes. And then we started thinking about, just kind of coming up with kind of this language about storytelling and circles, and how to engage this proscenium space that we're in, and just starting to, as I say, reimagine. But very, very quickly, we really started to fold in all of the other elements, the lighting and the music and the costumes and the movement, so all of the designers have been so instrumental in creating what we have now. And so then it's been really fun to kind of move off, and then we're rehearsing and everyone's designing and building costumes and building the set in different corners, and then we kind of get to come back and put all of the things that we constructed together back together. So it's been a really cool process. And as I said, it's such an incredible team. Everybody's just been very focused and very connected and just very open and generous the whole time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 1000%. It's been so beautiful to watch it all come together and work so beautifully together. So yes, definitely. I I feel like it's such an honor to work on Toni Morrison's work, and how you kind of hinted at this earlier of like, we are 50 plus years after The Bluest Eye was published, and just how does it feel to honor her legacy and to work on this play, and what does kind of working on Toni Morrison mean to you?
So, it's funny. I think that The Bluest Eye is the first encounter I ever had with Toni Morrison, because I read it. I
Wow.
can't remember exactly when, but it was like in middle school, maybe early high school. And so I remember very vividly reading the book and loving the book. I just thought it was so
Yeah.
amazing, especially I think as a young person reading the book, it really hits in a different kind of in a different kind of way. It's funny how much the experience of reading kind of evolves over time. But so I always knew that that the piece was incredibly powerful. And then over the years, have had so many opportunities to watch different interviews with her, read her other work, and I mean, it's just astonishing. Sometimes you're just like, what is she even do? What is happening?
Yeah.
It's so like her work is just so surprising. But I think the other thing too is that, you know, she is someone who so embraces and embodies a kind of Black storytelling tradition. And so the way that her pieces move, it's, in the way that, so many things inside of Black culture move, meaning it's not just linear. We're talking about the circular nature of things. And she embodies
Mhm.
that so beautifully in her work. She's always playing with, what does time mean and where does it go? And there was another piece, another wonderful playwright named Nambi Kelly. She
Mhm.
wrote an adaptation of Toni Morrison's play, Jazz, of the novel Jazz. And so Nambi and I had worked on that play a number of years ago. And that play, I mean, that book too, it moves like music, kind of in the same way the Bluest Eye storytelling does. And I find it so grounding, because it feels like I don't know, it just kind of connects you to like a deeper part of your soul. Like I feel like I understand her work and her way of writing in a really very deep and profound way. So it's exciting to think about, oh, okay, how do we actually embody the energy that she has created in her works and actually put it on stage? And thankfully, we have this incredible adaptation by Lydia
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
guide us through that process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I've found so inspiring in the way that you've directed this piece, I feel like you really meet kind of all the characters where they are. And what's important to you is telling the story rather than like placing judgment on any character or anything like that. And what is that experience like for a piece that is so dense? There's so much rooted in it. Like what is that experience like?
Yeah, it's been fun actually. And it's cool. I mean, really, we just have to give so many props to Lydia, because I don't really
Yes.
know how she did this. She really said like, these are the most important events in this story that you wanted to highlight. You need to know this in order to get to this point. And so she weaved she just
Yeah.
crafted it so beautifully. And what's great is we've had, which you don't often have when you're working on something. We have such incredible kind of other source material, meaning we
Yeah.
have the book. And so there's so many moments that we were able to go back in the book and say, oh, okay, this character, we have a little bit more history. We have history of the house that they live in. And it helped us fill in a lot of the colors, which was kind of amazing. And I'm trying to remember the question you asked me, and it's totally gone away.
Just thinking about how you've kind of met all the characters where they are,
Mm,
like telling their story was kind of what was important to you rather than like placing judgment or making anyone feel isolated or anything like that. I felt like we were truly meeting this community in a way that was so whole and back to circles. It was so
yeah.
just like, yeah.
It's partly to one of the things, in addition to thinking about like what it means for us to tell the story as a community and for the community, one of the kind of phrases that we come back to a lot is what it means to kind of, that this play is kind of like the portrait of a community as well. There's so
Yes.
many different kinds of people represented, even amongst Black girls, there's so many kinds of girls represented. Amongst Black women, there's so many different Black women represented. The Black men, there's so many different colors of Black men represented. And so we really, I felt like, you know, our job is really to paint the portrait of the community. And in order to do that, honestly, we really do have to let people be who they are, because in letting them be who they are and us understanding how they get to the place that they are in the story, it helps us understand also like why and how people collide with one another, why and how people support one another, why and how people push each other away, you know, reject people, honor people, love people, you know. But in order to really capture all of those energies, we really have to let people be as they are, and then the conflicts kind of come to life, and then we can examine those as well. But it's like, it's essential and very important for everybody to really feel very different. And I think part of our process too has been trying to understand, how did these people end up the way they are right now, you know? And so that's kind of been a central question for us. So we just let them be.
Yes, yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. I think what was really fun at the beginning of rehearsal, you had all of us as a collective, as an ensemble, we did an assignment where it was like, what is the main idea of the play? And we like had a whole list and we had to narrow it down. And like, that was such a fun activity that I never experienced before. But as a collective, we had decided that the main idea of the play was nature/nurture. And I'm just curious what does that mean to you when working on this play, nature/nurture?
Yeah, you know, and first of all, I have to give credit to that exercise. I actually have borrowed from a British director. Her name's Katie Mitchell, incredible, brilliant, amazing director. And she actually has this great directing book. And it's one of the exercises that's in there. And it's so beautiful because I have found it's such a, as you have said, like such an incredible way of having the entire group come to a consensus about what we're doing, you know, and why, and kind of what's fueling the energies of the play. So it was a lot of fun. You're right. We came up with like, I don't know, we must have had like,
we had lots of words,
80 words or something like that. And somehow we're able to narrow it down to nature/nurture. And yeah, it's really, I don't know, you know, it's so funny. It works. The thing that's so perfect about that phrase is that it encompasses so much, right? It's both about the earth. You know, we've talked a lot, there's great lines in the play about, you know, I talk about how the earth was hostile to marigolds, you know, that marigolds didn't grow in this whole place that whole entire year. Like, what is this actual soil that we are treading upon? And what's our understanding of that soil? How many people have been displaced, murdered, so that we can walk on this land that we're walking on today? So it's both talking about just literally the soil and what the evolution and the nature of the soil is that we're walking upon. And then it's also about our individual lives and individual lives of these characters. You know, the beautiful thing is, you know, we get to watch the story of Charlie. We get to really watch his evolution into manhood over the course of this play. And you get to see not just the man who he's become, who's just kind of, you know, tortured now, but you understand, how did he get to be the way that he is? And if not for X, Y, or Z circumstances in his life, how would he have been a different person? Same thing for Mrs. Breedlove. And I think that's the really beautiful thing about being able to watch the story of these young girls also, is that you both get to hear who they were, but in many cases also who they've become, and as they're looking back on their lives. And of course, you don't get that journey for Piccola, but you can even understand, how did she, even at her young age, get to become who she is? So it's like, it's both this kind of conflict too, between what is actually natural and what are the forces working upon people that ultimately make them who they are. So that's why both the nature and the nurture feel so essential to the main point of the story.
Yes, yes, I love it. Ah, that's also great. And I did want to kind of leave us with a final question of, you gave this amazing presentation to the entire design team and the actors. And we were talking about like, how do we find healing? How do we find joy in moments of this play? And just thinking about what was it like to find joy and healing in this process? And how do we move forward with those moments of joy and healing through storytelling with this play?
Hmm. It's so interesting. And then again, I go back, right? So if we think about origins of storytelling, if we think about origins of ceremonies, origins of rituals, any ritual that we do is about creating transformation, right? And that transformation can be healing, that transformation can be understanding, that transformation can be so many different things to help people understand their own voice, the transformation of understanding who we are and how we came to be who we are. And so very much, I think the whole process, and part of the reason that we, think about ritual so much is because it really helps to root us in why we are telling this story, right? And if we can create a space for transformation, if we can create a space for healing for the audience, then ultimately we have accomplished our own goal. One of the things that is kind of spoken a lot, especially in kind of West African cosmology, is this notion of whatever we do should be practical and it should contribute to the betterment of the society. And so part of our ritual here is in order to kind of activate those two principles too. It's both practical in the sense that you're about the history of the country, which feels very, very important because the story of Lorraine, Ohio is not really that different from the story of Boston, Massachusetts, And so if we can create a space for transformation, then we're kind of accomplishing what we've set out to do. And then on top of that also, I think hopefully part of the process of making the play for us as artists is, we're all learning and we're all growing as well, and how do we make space for that transformation amongst ourselves in addition to the audience. And then also, the play is very, it has a lot of darkness in it, right? But it does also have a lot of joy. That's just the story of Black America,
Yeah.
And so we've been able to kind of embody that and say, oh, in addition to making sure that we're being really, really honest and true about the story that we're telling, where are we also finding light and joy in the making, in the same way that the play kind of insists upon joy, insists upon healing, even through the trauma of the story that we're telling.
Yes, so well said. Oh my gosh. Well, Awoye, it has been a privilege to work on this whole process with you and also sit here and this morning and talk to you about all the things that kind of go into our wonderful production of The Bluest Eye. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for everything. We truly could not have made this without you. So thank you so much for everything, and to be continued.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
This is Lydia Diamonds.
The Bluest Eye.
Bluest Eye.